Well, I always tell people that I refuse to answer this on the grounds that my head might explode.
And that is a perfectly logical answer. I accept that. Welcome to A Book and a Dream with Megan O'Russell, an author's adventure in writing, reading, and being an epic fangirl. Thank you for joining me for this special episode of A Book and a Dream. Today, we have the wonderful author Victoria Gilbert with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Victoria.
Thank you.
Now, I was really interested to talk to you, and we'll hop back to your books in just a minute. But one of the most fascinating things that I've seen about your publishing career is how quickly you managed to change directions from being a YA author to being a mystery author. So that is going to be some fun things to chat about for our readers. But first of all, you started as a young adult author, correct?
That's right.
Now, what inspired you to hop into YA as the first genre that you wanted to write in?
When I first started writing, I was writing in fantasy and sci-fi, and I just enjoyed some of the YA books that were in that genre, and so I thought it would be fun to write one. And I had written an adult sci-fi that didn't sell or, get anywhere. So I thought, well, let me try writing a YA fantasy. And so that's how I really managed to get into it. That got me my first agent. So
that's now, was writing a lifelong goal for you, or was it something that you decided, like, as life went on, you wanted to become an author? Or did you start on that journey when you were a kid? Were you really into like journals and writing, or how did you decide that writing a book was something you needed to do in your life?
Well, I always loved writing. I loved reading. As soon as I learned how to read, I realized, oh, those words make a story. I was reading all the time, and I read so much that people were just like, worried about me sometimes because I read so much. But I'm a speed reader, so it made it even easier to read a lot. And so I always wanted to write a book, and for some strange reason, I wrote a lot of poetry, and I wrote some short stories and various things, and I'd start all these ideas for stories even when I was a kid, but as far as novels, I just never got around to finishing one or to actually writing one, and then life sort of came along, and I was a theater major in college, and I was mainly in costume design.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I did that for a little while. And then I went back to school to get a graduate degree in library science, mainly because at the time I was married to a musician. And I thought, two artists in one family, sometimes that doesn't work out.
That's true. Theater is not the most stable. As a professional musical theater actor, that is not all the stability you could want in life.
Right. So I decided to use my background. And the interesting thing was, when I went to library school at Indiana, they had never had a theater person, a real theater person, not just theater history, who went to their school, to library school. So they were really interested in that. And I got a good deal to go to library school, free tuition, which was a really good deal.
Wow.
And so I got my library degree thinking that I wouldn't be working in the arts anymore. I would be doing library work, which was fine because I love books and reading and so forth. But then every job I've ever had in the library world was related to the performing and visual arts, because that's where my background came in. And I was unique in that aspect.
That's amazing that you got to work the two passions together like that.
Yeah. I worked at Lincoln Center Library for the Performing Arts.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I worked, and then I moved to the Museum for Television and Radio, which was now the Paley Center in New York City. And I was doing reference and research.
Wow. I knew it
Yeah.
about none of this before the interview. That's so cool.
Yeah. The whole thing was I learned a lot. Both of those jobs, I had a background in theater, music, art, but I didn't have a background in some other fields that I learned a lot more about, which included dance and film and TV. So it was really helpful, to be more rounded in the arts because I got that background. And then a job came up to be the director of a library at a university, which is a performing arts university, performing and visual arts university in North Carolina. And so I took that job and I worked there for 25 years.
Wow. And so in all of this, you still wanted to write a book. I mean, I would just like be in a corner with like videos of Balanchine living my best life.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I still wanted to do something creative though. I mean, I love my job. I love libraries. And it was really exciting because I got to work with artists and I got to work with performing artists. And so, at one point, and this is the truth, is that I was in my mid 50s and I was still working as the library director. And I decided, I should just write a book to prove to myself that I can finish a novel. And that was really the goal at first. So I sat down and wrote this adult sci-fi, which I then wrote a sequel to, and neither one of them sold. So, that was that. But I'd gotten so involved with it that I decided to keep trying. And I wrote a young adult fantasy called Crown of Ice, which is a retelling of The Snow Queen by H.C. Andersen. And that actually got me an agent and then a deal with a small publishing company. So I started thinking, well, this is what I'm going to be doing. And I actually had contracts for the second book in the Crown of Ice series and some more books, other books. I had a young adult sci-fi published. And then things kind of fell out with the publishing company. I won't go into detail, but I had to pull my rights on all the books.
Yeah.
And that's a very traumatic experience.
It is. I've been through it. And, I will say, because I still have an agent. I have gone more the indie route because when I pulled all my rights, it just made the most sense to not try and reshop them out because they'd already been like tainted with publication. But
right.
that was the time that I was most grateful for having an agent, was getting my rights back. I don't know how I would have done it myself. And a lot of people have said, you're an indie, why do you need an agent? And it's like, well, for him to shop things out, but also because if you have to pull your contract, you really need someone on your side.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I was really lucky because my first agent, it's a small boutique agency, so that there's an owner and a couple of agents. And my first agent, she decided to leave the business. And so I was thinking, I'm going to have to go through this again to find an agent. But fortunately, her boss, who owns the agency, took me on. And she's now my agent. And it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me because Fran Black, who's now my agent from Literary Council, is really, great. It's been great for my career. And so that change, at first it seemed scary, but it was really good. It really worked out for the best. And Fran was the person who, when we pulled on my rights, and I was very depressed. I mean, I'll admit it, I was down. I didn't know what to do. Here I'd lost contracts and everything. She said, well, maybe, you need to write something different. And I said, well, I'm not sure what. And she said, well, what do you like to read? Of course, that's the best question to ask. So I said I liked mysteries. One of the things I really liked was mysteries. And she suggested I write one.
That's amazing. I love that. it worked out so well for you because you hear so many horror stories about people going through like 3, 4, and 5 agents before they really like land that book deal.
Yeah, Fran has been wonderful. And she said, write a mystery. And I said, well, I don't know if I can. And she said, well, just try. So I wrote a cozy mystery. That was A Murder for the Books. And it features a librarian as a protagonist, which, I was writing what I know. And I thought it would be useful to write about something I knew something about.
Absolutely.
And that's the first book in the Blue Ridge Library Mystery Series, which is also set in a place I know well, which is where I grew up in Northern Virginia at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I was pulling all those things together to make it authentic, and feel real. And as it turned out, it apparently, it was funny because I'd always expected, you go on submission and you're waiting. And we sent it out. Fran sent out the book and pitch and everything. And within a week, we had 2 or 3 offers. So it was like, we suddenly realized, yes, this is the genre you should be writing.
That's like a Cinderella story right there.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, how much did you have to refigure how you write the books, how you interact with your readers, other authors? How much of your general writing life did you have to rebuild by switching genres like that?
Well, the biggest thing was I changed to a pen name, which is Victoria Gilbert. I was originally writing under my real name. And so, with social media, all of a sudden you have to create it again because you're under a new name. Fortunately for me, well, maybe not so fortunately, but I didn't have a huge following under my real name. So it wasn't a big loss. I started up again under Victoria Gilbert, and I've grown a pretty good following on social media with that. Writing-wise, it's just a different... I'm with a publisher who's more of a mid-range, Crooked Lane Books. They're not the big 5, but they're not a small publisher either. So there's much more support than I was getting before.
That's excellent. Now, with your mystery series, you have a contract for several books at a time, correct?
Yes.
And what's it like working with that kind of time frame laid out in front of you? Because that you often hear about that as sort of the author's dream of like, I want to have like all these books under contract. But what is it like once you're actually in that position of having all these deadlines?
Yeah, that's a little different. It's interesting to me to see sometimes when people and I don't look down on anybody who's writing, but it's funny because I see people saying, well, I'm writing my first book and they don't have deals yet. And, they spend 5 years on it and whatever. And I'm sorry to say that unless you're George R.R. Martin or somebody, you don't get 5 years.
No one wants to wait that long.
In fact, I was getting less than 7 months and we renegotiated to give me 7 months between books. So, it's doable for me, but you can't dilly-dally. You have to just go from one to the next and really stick with it. One of the reasons I retired from my library director job early is because I just found I couldn't do both things well. It was too much to try to keep up with writing to meet the deadlines and do that job. So a couple of years ago, I retired, and now I'm writing full time.
That's amazing. How do you structure your writing day that now that you are full time? Do you have like a certain word count that you want to get to every day, or do you write as fast as you can and then spend a lot of time polishing?
Um, I do a lot of outlining and chapter outlines because with the mystery I found, I've always been a planner rather than a pantser or, a plotter. But especially with the mysteries, I've discovered that for me, I have to have really detailed outlines. I have to have that for putting in the red herrings and the clues and leading properly to the end. And so I usually base it more on writing X number of pages a day or a chapter a day or, however I am in the process. As I get closer to the deadline, I have to write more, of course. But I tend to, in the beginning, I'm writing maybe 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then as it gets close to the deadline, I'm writing however many hours it takes, 7 days a week.
That feels about right. Mm-hmm. Now, for newer authors who are having issues with, it's daunting when you see how long a novel is and you're like, I have to write, at least 60 to 80,000 words. How am I going to do that? What advice do you have for people who get overwhelmed by the size of actually writing a novel?
Yeah, what I've discovered is my books are supposed to be around 80,000 words. That's the average. And if you really break it down, it's not as daunting if you think about it in terms of, I used to use the example with some other writers that if you only wrote 1 page a day for a year, 365 days, that's 365 pages, that's a book. That's basically 80,000 words or so. So, I think people look at it and go, oh, it's so much, but it really isn't. If you start thinking about it more in terms of breaking it into whatever units work for you, every day I'm going to write so many words, and just think about that rather than I'll never get to the end, because you will get to the end if you just break it down and say, if I can write this much in a week or a month or however works for the person, everybody's different. But breaking it into smaller bits really helps.
It's so true. It's one of those things where I'm a word count person. I'm a word count person all the way. I have I'm going to do 2,500 words today. And people, because I do publish 5 to 6 books a year, look at me and are like, that's too much. I can't do it. And I've told them so many times, start with 500 words, which is basically a page. Just do that.
Right.
You'll be okay. It'll be great. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's so easy to burn out. Now,
yeah,
going back to, because, this is a lot of YA with a book and a dream. Now, Crown of Ice is currently available, correct?
Yes, it is. I published it and its sequels, Scepter of Fire, with my author co-op, Snowy Wings Publishing. So they are both out right now.
Perfect. And for our YA fans of this podcast, what would you tell them are the comp titles for it?
You mean comparison or?
Yes. What, if you like this, you'll love Crown of Ice.
Oh gosh. That's hard because
I know it's the worst question.
It's a little different. It's I would just say that it's really not like a lot of, and maybe that's why, it's not doing great sales. It's not as much like a lot of YA that's real popular right now. It's got characters who are more ordinary people who do extraordinary things. That's what I like to say.
I love that. That's great.
And it's a more smaller scale. It's not an epic fantasy, but it's character driven, and it really deals with characters, and there's magic involved, of course, and other fun things. But a lot of it is about the character growth, and Crown of Ice in particular is about a young woman who the main theme really is, can someone who's extremely damaged from life learn to love again? And that's really the theme of the book.
That's amazing. I think that's a great theme.
And
that's
Scepter
a tough
of Fire,
topic.
which actually has a different protagonist. The characters appear again from Crown of Ice, appear again in Scepter of Fire, but the protagonist is different. And the protagonist in Scepter of Fire is a ugly duckling, so to speak. She's not an attractive person, and she's hung up on this, even though she's a great healer and she has all these other skills. And basically, it's her learning through the course of the book her own value, and that's not based on looks. And her courage and her compassion is what's really important.
That's very cool. And I have found in talking to a lot of other authors that there is a shocking amount of crossover between theater people, actors, and authors. And all of the theater turned author people that I've spoken to, it's always so much character driven storytelling. And I feel like it's so natural for us because, that's what you do on stage. It's character driven storytelling. And I think that's such a cool crossover. Now, if you could go back in time, so I guess before Crown of Ice, this would be before you wrote your first sci-fi, what advice would you give you before you started writing your first full-length novel?
One of the things I've learned that I think surprised me was that I don't know why this is true. It shouldn't have surprised me because I'll go back to an acting theater issue. I learned when I was studying acting, although I wasn't an actress per se, but I studied it, that sometimes the roles you thought you would be perfect for, you're not good at, and the roles that you don't seem like you would fit, you do better. And so when I've learned with writing that sometimes, even though we love a particular genre, or we personally might say, I really want to read just fantasy or sci-fi, that perhaps our skill set, our writing style, our tone, and everything about it is not the best match for that particular genre. And so I always tell people, if they get stuck, like say you've been writing, publishing, whether it's indie or traditional or whatever, and you're not having a lot of success, try something else, because you never know. I never thought I could write a mystery, and I've had much more success writing the mysteries. I just realized that the way that I write, the tone of my writing, the style of my writing fits that genre. And so that's just something I would tell myself. Just like, look at yourself, look at what really fits, not just what you like, to read. And I mean, I've always liked mysteries too, but it's something I see people struggling with because they love something. I want to be a fantasy author, and maybe their skills are better for rom-com or something else. It's just it's an experiment that you can try and say,
That's such valuable advice, because so often what I hear from people is, pick your niche and stick to it, and don't disappoint your readers by taking any chances. So even, I know a lot of YA authors who are like, I will only write retellings. That's all people want. And it's so true, where they could have this awesome gift for writing in a different genre, and they've just, trapped themselves in a little box. So thank you. That is some very valuable advice.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I learned it the hard way.
And I appreciate you sharing what you got from that struggle, because losing a publisher and having contracts canceled is, it deflates you. It really just rips your insides out, and you just walk around like a weird little husk for a while until you figure out what to do with your life.
It's true. Yeah. I've seen so many people this has happened to, and it's the sad thing is in publishing too, not to be discouraging to people, but you really have to be flexible, because trends change and all these things change, but also publishers go under. Even publishers you thought were really strong. I've seen friends of mine who were with publishers and their books have been winning awards and all these things have been great. And all of a sudden the publisher closes its doors. And, you have to have the long game. That's what I always say. It's the long game. I've written 12 books now. Not all are out right now, but and one thing I've learned is that over time, especially with the mysteries, is that even now people are still discovering the first book in my Blue Ridge series, and the fifth book is coming out in December. So, there's a long game aspect to it where you're building, and you'll see a review and it'll say, "Oh, I like this fifth book, but I'm going to go back and read the first four." So that's part of it too, is continuing to write, and whether you're indie or traditional, is just keep at it.
Yes, you have to invest in having those books so you can build your backlist. A backlist is so valuable, but it's so hard to sort of hang on by your teeth while you create the backlist. That's a struggle, but it's worth it. Having those 4 books for people to go back and read after they discovered they liked book 5 monetarily is a huge difference. But also as far as building your fan base, that's when you turn people from casual readers to devoted fans, and that's what we're all aiming for.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know you do indie publishing, but you have to have that number of books out that people say, "Oh, I know her books. I know what she writes." And then they're going to instantly buy the next one. And it takes a while to get to that point sometimes.
It does. And, it's totally doable. And everyone who's listening, it's totally doable. You can do it. Just, gird your loins. It's going to be a long ride.
Just don't expect, if the first book doesn't, do fantastically, is not a point to give up, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yes. Keep plugging away. If you love it, it's worth it. And there is a business side of it that you can succeed at if you keep going.
Yes.
Now, before I let you go, could you tell our listeners where they can find you on social media?
Yes. And actually the easiest thing to do is to go to my website, which is victoriagilbertmysteries.com. And that's all one word, victoriagilbertmysteries.com. And if they go there, they'll not only find out all the information on my books and news about events and my links to podcasts and links to videos, but also I link all of my social media accounts and I keep those up to date so that people can just go in and click through. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. I have an author page on Facebook. But I think it's just easier sometimes if you go to the website and down at the bottom you'll see the click for Facebook or whatever. That way you don't have to remember all the different handles that you're forced to create.
Yeah, when you're a Russell author on some and Megan O. Russell on other, and you really want to know who the other O. Russell author is. Who are they? Why did someone claim that?
Yeah.
Now, the final thing, we are going to go through the final 4 questions with you. So, if you could only recommend one book, which would you choose?
Well, I always tell people that I refuse to answer this on the grounds that my head might explode.
And that is a perfectly logical answer. I accept that.
I mean, as a librarian and a longtime reader, it's just impossible for me to pick one. I just can't do it.
I just think that answer is amazing. Just absolutely my brain is going to explode and I refuse. So the second question, what song can you count on to pump you up and lift your spirits?
Oh, I've been listening to, I'm really eclectic with music. I studied classical music when I was younger. I sang. But I love classical music, but I also love a lot of contemporary music. I love jazz. So one song right now I've been listening to a lot is Delta Goodrem, who's from Australia, and she has a song called Enough. And I encourage people to listen to it, because if you're writing and you're fighting the fight against, what the market wants, what everybody wants, what everybody's asking you for, I just feel like the song encapsulates my feeling about that you're enough, and that you're good enough, and you don't have to prove to everybody that you're good enough, but you are.
I am very excited to listen to this song, and Victoria actually already sent me a link to it. So with Victoria's website and social media links, I will link that YouTube in the show notes as well. All right. Question number 3. What do you want the tagline of your life to be?
Well, it's funny. The thing I have on my Facebook page, on my personal Facebook page, is a quote from Disney's live action Cinderella, which I like that movie, but I'm not a huge fan of such things. But I loved this line. There's a line that says that, have courage and be kind. And so I would like people to say she had courage and she was kind, because I think those two things show what I feel is important, is that you do have to be strong and have courage and try things and experiment and put yourself out there, but also you have to be kind to others and yourself.
That, especially, with the world how it is right now, that is very valuable advice. And the final question, what is the most inspiring thing anyone has ever said to you?
With writing, it's when readers say that my books have in some way touched them, have made their lives better, have even given them an escape, or just, really meant something to them. And I think that's why we're writing. We're writing to communicate. We're writing to reach out to people and to convey thoughts and feelings. And so when you get that validation, that's, to me, is the most wonderful thing.
That is amazing and valuable. And I think that is part of what draws so many theater people to writing, is that, there isn't the instant gratification of being on stage and hearing people clap, but it is still that human to human communication. So I love that. That is great. Well, thank you so much for coming on to join us for A Book and a Dream. I am excited to check out your mystery series, and yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And I always like to thank all the readers in the world, because writers would be nothing without readers.